April 19th, 43. The sun had barely crested the horizon over East Anglia, painting the English countryside in muted gold, when the men of the 56th Fighter Group began pre-flight checks on new fleet of aircraft. These were no ordinary fighters. These were P-47 Thunderbolts, massive, bristling with guns, and powered by the most advanced radial engines of the era. For most of the pilots, it was the first time they had seen him in action. The Thunderbolt had arrived in Europe, untested in combat, carrying the weight of expectation on its enormous wings. Among these pilots was Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson, a young American from Oklahoma, calm, methodical, and keenly aware of the stakes. When war erupted in Europe, Johnson joined the U.S. Army Air Corps, training at fields that were as rough as the planes they flew. He wasn't the fastest learner. Instructors called him methodical, sometimes even too cautious. But those who flew beside him noticed something different. He never panicked. He studied every checklist, every engine diagram, until he knew the aircraft as intimately as a surgeon knows anatomy. That temperament made him the perfect match for the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, a machine built not for elegance but endurance. Today, he and his squadron would escort a formation of B-17 bombers over northern France, penetrating airspace long controlled by the Luftwaffe. It was a dangerous mission. German fighters were waiting, and the bombers were slow, heavily laden, and vulnerable. The P-47s, powerful and untested, were their only hope. Johnson climbed into the cockpit, feeling the weight of the machine beneath him. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine roared to life, an 18-cylinder beast delivering over 2,000 horsepower. The vibration thrummed through his body, a mechanical heartbeat that reminded him that this was no ordinary fighter. The Thunderbolt was heavy, nearly 5 tons fully loaded, but its design promised something rare: unmatched durability, altitude performance, and firepower. As the formation lifted off, the reality of the mission became clear. Radar had already picked up German activity over the Normandy coast. Jagdgeschwader units, flying the deadly Focke-Wulf Fw 190 and Messerschmitt Bf 109s, were positioning themselves to intercept the bombers. These pilots were experienced, hardened by years of combat, and highly efficient in the Luftwaffe's precision doctrine. Their planes were nimble, fast, and armed with cannons capable of turning a bomber into a fireball within seconds. Yet, the P-47s, massive though they were, had their own advantages. The General Electric turbo supercharger allowed them to maintain full power at altitudes where the Fw 190 began to falter. They could dive at speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour without fear of tearing the wings from the airframe. Their 8.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns provided devastating firepower, enough to threaten any fighter or bomber. Johnson's squadron climbed to intercept. Already tension gripped the young pilots. Many of these Thunderbolts had only recently arrived in England. Mechanics and engineers had rushed to get them ready, and while the airframes were robust, the pilots themselves were learning the machine under the most extreme conditions imaginable. The first German fighters appeared as specks against the bright morning sky, quickly resolving into menacing silhouettes. The Focke-Wulf Fw 190s, known for their agility and firepower, swooped down with tactical precision. In a single coordinated pass, they ripped through the bomber formation. Tracer rounds stitched patterns of fire, and the deafening roar of cannons filled the air. It was chaos. Johnson responded with calm efficiency, leveraging the Thunderbolt's key engineering advantage, its sheer durability and dive speed. Unlike lighter Allied fighters, which could be shredded by German cannons, the P-47 absorbed punishment with its armor-plated cockpit, self-sealing fuel tanks, and rugged aluminum frame. Even when tracer rounds tore through the fuselage and wings, the engine continued to roar. Johnson felt the plane's stability beneath him, a reassurance that the Thunderbolt would not fail him when he needed it most. He dove from above, gaining speed, using the P-47's mass to swing through a high-speed pass. The Fw 190s attempted to follow, but the Thunderbolt's weight and turbocharged engine gave it an advantage in sustained high-altitude dives. In seconds, Johnson transitioned from defense to offense, his 8 machine guns bringing down one Fw 190 and sending the others scattering. Between attacks, Johnson and his wingmen were not just fighting skill and courage, they were putting engineering theory into practice. The P-47 was more than a fighter, it was a platform designed to dominate the skies at high altitude. Its radial engine, air-cooled and almost impervious to small arms or light cannon fire, could continue operating after sustaining significant damage. Its wing structure, reinforced to withstand extreme G-forces, allowed pilots to dive and pull out of maneuvers that would destroy lighter aircraft. Comparatively, the German Fw-190 excelled in tight turns and roll rate, but at higher altitudes and under heavy attack, it could not withstand repeated passes by the Thunderbolt. Johnson had learned from training exercises that by climbing above the enemy and diving with precision, he could dictate the terms of engagement. In combat, the P-47's combination of speed, altitude performance, and durability was lethal. German mechanics and pilots alike would later acknowledge that the Thunderbolt's design was extraordinary, calling it almost tank-like in its resilience. By the time the bombers reached their target, Johnson's squadron had already encountered repeated waves of Luftwaffe fighters. Every dive, turn, and strafing run was a test of both pilot skill and machine engineering. The Thunderbolt's performance characteristics were fully revealed. It could maintain energy in extended dives, recover from high-speed maneuvers without losing control, and absorb damage that would destroy almost any other single-engine fighter. Its range and fuel capacity, especially with external drop tanks, allowed pilots to escort bombers deep into enemy territory, something earlier Allied fighters could not accomplish. In the cockpit, Johnson could feel the balance of speed, power, and weight. The aircraft responded precisely, as if designed to anticipate every decision he made. The German pilots, in contrast, found themselves overextended. Their Fw-1900s, optimized for medium-altitude dogfights, struggled to match the P-47 in vertical speed and endurance. In a single engagement, Johnson had experienced a brutal confirmation of what engineers and pilots had long suspected. The Thunderbolt was a new kind of fighter. One that combined the raw durability of a bomber with the agility and firepower of a frontline fighter. By the time the bombers dropped their payloads and turned for home, Johnson had already earned his first aerial victories in the Thunderbolt. Yet the mission was far from over. The Luftwaffe was relentless, and every moment in the sky demanded that pilot and machine work in perfect harmony. It was here, in these first minutes of combat, that the P-47 Thunderbolt proved itself not just as a machine, but as a decisive instrument of war. The P-47 Thunderbolts had barely cleared the English coast when the first German fighters appeared on the horizon. Specks against the pale morning sky quickly resolved into the deadly silhouettes of Focke-Wulf Fw-190s, their radial engines screaming as they dove toward the American bomber formation. Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson gripped the control stick, his knuckles white, yet calm. The Thunderbolt beneath him thrummed with a deep, powerful resonance. Its Pratt & Whitney R2800 double LOSP engine, 18 cylinders producing over 2,000 horsepower, was ready to respond instantly. Unlike lighter Allied fighters, the P-47's engine, paired with the GE turbo supercharger system, allowed it to maintain full power at altitudes above 30,000 feet, a realm where the Fw-190's BMW 801D2 engine began to lose efficiency. The German Fw-1900s were designed for agility, capable of rapid rolls and tight-turning engagements. They relied on speed and maneuverability to make quick strikes, but the Thunderbolt was built differently. Its massive wings and reinforced aluminum airframe could absorb high-speed maneuvers and hits that would destroy most fighters. Johnson dove slightly, gaining speed, letting gravity combine with the P-47's turbocharged engine to propel him into attack position. Even from a vertical climb or dive, the Thunderbolt maintained stability, allowing him to aim and fire with precision. 8 50 caliber Browning machine guns unleashed a torrent of fire. One Fw-190 spiraled down in smoke, another barely escaped. This encounter was more than a test of courage, it was a demonstration of the P-47's engineering supremacy. The Thunderbolt could take punishment, maintain power at high altitude, and leverage dive speed in ways that the Fw-190 could not. While German pilots excelled at low to mid-altitude dogfights, the P-47 dominated and sustained high-altitude engagements, a factor that would become critical in the days to come. Once the initial skirmish passed, Johnson realized that survival meant exploiting the Thunderbolt's unique engineering advantages. Its weight, structural integrity, and high-altitude performance turned potential disadvantages into strategic tools. The Fw-1990's advantages in roll rate and turning agility could be neutralized by vertical maneuvers, where the Thunderbolt's turbocharged engine and dive capability excelled. By climbing above the enemy, Johnson could initiate attacks from energy advantage, diving with tremendous speed, firing, and climbing back to altitude before German pilots could respond. Johnson rolled his P-47 through a high-speed dive, the airframe flexing slightly under the load, yet remaining unyielding. Unlike the Fw-190, which could suffer control stiffness at high speeds and extreme dives, the Thunderbolt maintained control authority, giving Johnson confidence to execute maneuvers that others would avoid. He pressed the trigger, watching his rounds tear into an enemy fighter. The Fw-190 spiraled down, a victim of raw firepower combined with precision tactics. Johnson's success here was not just pilot skill, it was a symphony of engineering design coming to life. The P-47 was built for vertical combat and survivability, while the Fw-190 was optimized for low-altitude nimbleness. In this encounter, that engineering difference decided the outcome. Amid the chaos, a German pilot fired a burst of 20mm cannon rounds directly into Johnson's right wing. Flames erupted, smoke filled the cockpit, and instruments rattled violently. In any lighter aircraft, this could have meant instant death. But the P-47 was designed to survive just such punishment. Its radial engine, air-cooled and armored, continued to operate despite damage, while the self-sealing fuel tanks and armored cockpit prevented catastrophic fire spread. Johnson remained in control, guiding the flaming aircraft into a steep dive. Gravity combined with the Thunderbolt's reinforced structure, allowing him to accelerate without fear of structural failure, a maneuver that would have been suicidal in a lighter fighter like the Fw-190. Even as the flames licked the fuselage, the Thunderbolt's high dive speed became an escape tool. The aircraft could reach over 500 miles per hour in a controlled dive, far faster than a fully loaded Fw-190 could manage safely. Johnson fired bursts while descending, using the aircraft's .850 caliber guns to keep pursuing enemies at bay. Every second in the sky demonstrated the interplay between engineering and tactics. The plane's durability, power, and climb performance directly contributed to his survival. The Luftwaffe, used to fighters that could disable an aircraft with a few hits, had never faced a machine like this. Johnson's P-47 had transformed from a heavy newcomer into a formidable opponent, proving the genius of Cardvelli's design philosophy: protection, firepower, and power, above all. Once he gained some distance, Johnson began the carefully orchestrated maneuvering that would bring him home. He relied on the Thunderbolt's energy retention, the combination of its mass, turbocharged engine, and aerodynamic stability, to stay just out of reach of German fighters. While the Fw-190 excelled in tight maneuvers, it lacked the high-speed diving endurance and structural strength of the P-47. Johnson climbed, then dove, rolling slightly to maintain attack angles, and let the aircraft's energy advantage dictate the engagement. The Luftwaffe pilots found themselves frustrated, their agility countered by vertical tactics and brute force. As he executed these maneuvers, the engineering details became more than abstract concepts, they were life-saving realities. The Thunderbolt could absorb hits that would cripple other aircraft. Its retractable landing gear and wide track added stability in emergency landings, and its massive fuselage provided room for critical armor without compromising speed or maneuverability. The Fw-190, by contrast, could not withstand multiple high-caliber hits without risking structural failure. Johnson's escape was a masterclass in combining human skill with engineering advantage, demonstrating the tactical superiority that well-designed machines could provide in combat. By the end of the mission, Johnson had survived against overwhelming odds, with a P-47 riddled by rounds but still flying. The combination of engineering and pilot skill had turned what could have been a disaster into a resounding triumph. The Thunderbolt's armored cockpit, durable radial engine, self-sealing field akes, and turbocharged high-altitude performance had kept him alive while outmaneuvering and outlasting the Fw-1900s. This engagement demonstrated that raw speed, maneuverability, and firepower were important, but survivability and energy retention at altitude could decisively alter outcomes. German mechanics and pilots later admitted to being stunned by the aircraft's resilience. "It is like a flying tank," one recordedly said, referring to its ability to endure punishment and maintain performance. Johnson returned to base with a newfound confidence, aware that the P-47 had proven its worth in the crucible of combat. In these skies, the Thunderbolt had established a new benchmark, a machine capable of absorbing damage, sustaining combat at high altitude, and giving its pilot the tools to survive and triumph where others could not. Following his first harrowing mission, Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson prepared for another sortie, this time more familiar with the Thunderbolt's capabilities. Pre-flight checks were meticulous. Mechanics had reinforced fuel lines, verified gun synchronization, and inspected the massive aluminum airframe for stress from prior combat. Johnson climbed into the cockpit with a growing confidence, knowing that the P-47 was more than just a new fighter, it was a reliable combat machine. As the squadron climbed over northern France, radar reports indicated a formation of Fw-190s escorting a group of Ju-88 bombers. This was the Luftwaffe's classic tactic, high-speed interception with their fighters leading the bombers, followed by repeated slashing attacks. Johnson remembered the lessons from his first mission. He positioned his Thunderbolt above the enemy, using altitude as a tactical asset. Unlike the Fw-190, whose BMW 801 radial engine began losing efficiency above 25,000 feet, the P-47's turbocharged R2800 retained full power, giving Johnson the energy advantage to dive, climb, and maneuver at will. In the first pass, Johnson dove with incredible speed. The Thunderbolt's weight and structural rigidity absorbed the G-forces of the high-speed dive, while the .850 caliber Browning machine guns unleashed devastating firepower. One Fw-190 took critical hits, spiraled, and exploded in the sky. The Germans attempted to regroup, but the combination of firepower, dive performance, and superior high-altitude endurance meant that Johnson's squadron could engage multiple enemies effectively, something the Luftwaffe had not fully anticipated from the new American fighter. The dogfight intensified, and Johnson began to exploit the P-47's engineering advantages beyond raw speed and firepower. The fighter's wings were designed to withstand extreme loads, allowing the pilot to perform maneuvers that would crush a lighter airframe. Its twin-row radial engine, enclosed within a robust cowl and coupled with a turbo supercharger, permitted prolonged dives and climbs without losing control. By contrast, the Fw-190 excelled in agility and short bursts of speed, but was limited by structural stress and engine power at high altitude. Johnson pulled into a steep vertical climb, forcing his German pursuers to follow. The Thunderbolt maintained energy, and in a sudden stall-turn maneuver, Johnson reversed position, coming down behind an Fw-190 that had believed itself safely above him. A controlled burst of .50 caliber fire sent the enemy into a spinning descent. This engagement was more than tactics, it was a demonstration of how engineering dictated aerial outcomes. The P-47 combination of durable fuselage, energy retention, and heavy firepower allowed Johnson to dictate the terms of combat, which was rare when facing Luftwaffe squadron with superior maneuverability at lower altitudes. Mid-mission, Johnson encountered a coordinated attack by multiple Fw-190s. They slashed through his formation with coordinated passes, targeting the P-47s with a mix of 20mm cannon and 7.92mm machine guns. One round hit Johnson's right aileron, causing vibration and partial loss of control, yet the robust wing design and control linkages allowed him to maintain command of the aircraft. The Thunderbolt was engineered to endure combat damage and still allow the pilot to recover, a key difference from lighter fighters like the Fw-190, where a single hit to critical flight surfaces could be fatal. Johnson used every advantage: turbocharged climb to high altitude, long dive acceleration, and bursts of concentrated firepower. The P-47's firepower density meant that short windows of opportunity could be lethal to the enemy, unlike the lighter, lower-caliber machine guns of earlier American fighters. His squadron turned the tide, pushing the Fw-190s back, and secured the airspace long enough for the bombers to continue their mission. This engagement solidified the Thunderbolt's reputation: survivable, lethal, and capable of high-altitude dominance where previous fighters had struggled. The Luftwaffe quickly took note. Reports from German pilots and mechanics revealed growing concern. They recognized that the P-47 was not only heavily armored and fast, but could also maintain performance under punishment in a way the Fw-1990 could not. German engineering analyses acknowledged that the Thunderbolt's radial engine design, combined with its robust fuselage and wing construction, made it exceptionally durable, what one Luftwaffe mechanic described as almost indestructible for a single-engine fighter. The Germans began adjusting tactics. Rather than low to mid-altitude dogfights, they attempted to engage American fighters at lower altitudes where the Fw-190's agility could be maximized. Yet the Thunderbolt's ability to dive rapidly from high altitude with full control negated many of these attempts. Johnson exploited this repeatedly, using high-speed vertical attacks to surprise German formations. The mission became a series of calculated maneuvers, where energy retention, structural resilience, and heavy firepower were decisive. By the conclusion of this second combat sortie, Johnson had confirmed what engineers and pilots had hypothesized: the P-47 was a revolutionary design. Its air-cooled R2800 engine, massive fuselage, reinforced wings, turbo supercharger, and armament of 8.50 caliber guns created an aircraft capable of surviving hits, delivering devastating firepower, and dominating engagements where agility alone was insufficient. Compared to the Fw-190, the Thunderbolt could climb, dive, and retain energy for multiple attack passes without structural compromise. German fighters, though faster in short bursts and highly maneuverable at low altitude, could not overcome the combination of durability, speed, and firepower inherent in Johnson's aircraft. By the end of the mission, the P-47 had proven that American engineering, focused on resilience, firepower, and high-altitude performance, could decisively alter the air war. Johnson returned to base, aircraft scarred but intact, a testament to both pilot skill and mechanical genius. From these missions, the Thunderbolt earned a reputation among both Allied and Axis forces: a heavy, powerful, and nearly invincible fighter, capable of protecting bombers, punishing enemy fighters, and changing the calculus of aerial warfare over Europe. In combat, the P-47's speed became its most feared weapon. At full power, with the turbocharger engaged, the Thunderbolt could reach 444 miles per hour in level flight, faster than most German fighters could dive. The Fw-190, previously the terror of the Western Front, found itself unable to outrun or outclimb this new predator. American pilots learned to use that power with devastating effect. They would dive from altitude, striking like thunder, deliver a burst of 8 blazing 50 caliber guns, and then use raw speed to climb back to the clouds before the Luftwaffe could react. It was the embodiment of the boom and zoom doctrine, perfectly suited to the P-47's weight, horsepower, and aerodynamics. Even Luftwaffe veterans admitted that the Thunderbolt had changed the tone of the air war. Where once German pilots had hunted, now they were hunted. They respected the P-47's terrifying momentum, its ability to appear out of the sun and vanish just as quickly. One German officer later remarked in a post-war debriefing, "We did not fear the P-47 because of its looks. We feared it because no matter how much we hit it, it came back, always at great speed and always firing." By 1944, the P-47 had earned mere mythical status among Allied airmen. To bomber crews, it was the angel above, an aircraft that could dive from the heavens, shred enemy interceptors, and disappear into the blue. To engineers, it was proof that American industry could not only mass-produce machines, but also master performance. With over 15,000 Thunderbolts built, each one powered by an engine capable of 2,000 horsepower, the Allies had achieved something extraordinary, a blend of quality and quantity that no other nation could match. And yet, pilots never spoke of the P-47 as a brute, they spoke of it with reverence. Its turbo-supercharged climb rate, oxygen-assisted high-altitude performance, and rugged air-cooled engine made it nearly indestructible in both Europe and the Pacific. British and American technicians jointly tested the aircraft in extreme conditions: icing, overheat, and combat damage trials. In nearly every category, the Thunderbolt surpassed expectations. As the war dragged into its final year, German respect for the Thunderbolt grew quietly, even among Luftwaffe survivors. Captured pilots spoke candidly of their fear of engaging Thunderbolts at high altitude. They nicknamed it their Stier, the bull, because of its ability to absorb punishment and charge again. Ground crews recovering wreckage noticed something rare. Many Thunderbolts that went down did so not from engine failure, but from catastrophic structural hits that would have disintegrated any other fighter long before. For the Germans, this was a sobering realization. The Allied approach to engineering was shifting the balance of the skies. If this content was worth your attention, please like the video and subscribe to channel, so more videos about aviation marvels be brought to you.